Hey fellow Trek Chatters, I'm Pit Trekkie, and welcome to another episode of Pittsburgh's Trek Chat. It's been a couple months since my last video. It's been a little busy here at my house with the remodeling and with work, but I'm back and I have a really neat episode for you for today. We are going to be bringing back Trekking Through Trek with Chris and Robert. Today, as we're filming this, it is December 8th. Which means yesterday was the 40th anniversary of the release of Star Trek The Motion Picture. Man, I can't believe that it's been 40 years already. And it is something, it's a movie that I've really grown to love over the last couple of years. And it's a very kind of divisive movie, I think, with a lot of Star Trek fans. Some people love it, some people think it has the spirit of Star Trek, some people think it's too slow, it doesn't have a good pace, it's boring. But I think it's an amazing film. I was lucky enough to see it for the first time on the big screen 2 months ago. And it was amazing. That movie, Star Trek The Motion Picture, belongs on the big screen. I'll just say that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do a little overview with my good buddy Robert from Arkansas. And then we're going to kind of go over the movie and see what you guys think. So hello, Robert.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, sir. How are you?
I've got a little bit of allergy cold, but I'll be fine.
Well, that's that time of the year, unfortunately.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it is.
So why don't you, before we get started, why don't you talk a little bit about your memories of when Star Trek The Motion Picture came out?
Well, Star Trek The Motion Picture began my life affair with Star Trek. This is the first time the Star Trek The Motion Picture was the first Star Trek that actually saved my life. Mm-hmm. It was after the events that when I received PTC, and I was in a very suicidal state. And I read in the trade papers when I was stationed at Fort Knox, Kentucky, that Star Trek The Motion Picture was coming out in December. And the thought of seeing that movie kept me alive. It was the only thing that kept me alive.
Okay, yeah, you were a big fan before that, right? Oh,
I was a way big fan before that.
Okay.
But to actually see it happen, the thought that kept me going.
Yeah.
And that began the affair of Star Trek splitting in my life in a very, very interesting way.
Okay.
And it hasn't been the same since, I promise you.
Excellent. So you got to see it on the big screen right at the very beginning. What was that like?
Oh, it was absolutely phenomenal. It was like Star Trek on steroids for me.
Yeah.
Because the thing I didn't like was they really changed the music, the theme music.
Yeah.
But it wasn't actually that type of music. It was a more orchestrated version of it.
Yes.
And then when it opened up on with the new Klingon D7 battle cruisers, that's when I knew it was going to be something special.
Oh yeah.
Especially when in the first sequence. That was the first sequence. And when they locked onto the bridge of one of the D7s and did the 180 rotation from the bow to stern, and oh my God, that was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, you didn't see that in the original series, that's for sure.
No, you didn't. You didn't see that at all. Mm-hmm. And with the subtitles, it made it feel like a foreign film, which was absolutely fantastic. You didn't see that in the original series either. Mm-hmm. And then you see, and then as it progressed on, you see Spock trying to do putting on our Vulcan, and then you see our hero Admiral Kirk come to Starfleet headquarters.
Yep.
And that in itself was fantastic. And the first thing I saw was the change in the uniforms. And a lot of people say they look like pajamas.
Yeah.
They may look like pajamas, but I thought they were absolutely stunning. I thought that was the way Star Trek uniforms should have been in the first place.
Okay.
And it was just absolutely stunning. And the visuals were stunning. And then as it went up to the overall station, the overall movie was just absolutely fantastic for me. I loved the way the sequence went. There are some boring parts, and I'll admit that. And I'll go into that later. But overall, I think it was a fantastic movie. And it brought Star Trek back into focus again.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think for a lot of people that refit Enterprise was one of the nicest things that ever happened to that ship.
Oh, it's considered to be one of the most beautiful filming models ever made.
Oh, I know. I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I watched the motion picture 2 months ago on the big screen, I saw details in that model I'd never seen before. I mean, it literally blew me away. I've only seen the movie on TV for the longest time. So, I mean, really, like I said, it belongs on that screen.
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, you know, they had the detailing, the overall look of the ship. I mean, what really, when they first showed the Enterprise, with Scotty and Admiral Kirk were going aboard on the travel pod, when they first showed the Enterprise, what really ticked me off was the dry dock. It was a tease.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that was a tease. Because if you want to look at it from a technical aspect, the Enterprise was considered to be a character in the show to begin with.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a tease. So when they finally go on bow on, you know, and so we see the Enterprise without the structure of the dry dock, it was absolutely phenomenal. Oh my God, it was, you know, and this is fantastic. I mean, my heart skipped a beat when I saw it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there was nothing like that from the original series, and I'm not knocking the original series. They did the best effects that they could, but the transition that they made, it can't be beat. To this day, it still holds up on that screen.
Yes, I was getting over it last night and this morning, and for a 40-year-old movie, it still holds its own.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and it set the tone for the rest of Star Trek as we know it.
Absolutely. It
set the tone. You know, the visual style, the detailing, the way it was shot, everything. It just set the tone.
Oh.
That, you know, so 1979 was, but you know, that led to all the other movies and the series and all that, and that set the tone for everything.
Absolutely.
That set the tone for Star Trek as we know it now.
You got it. So let me ask you this: what do you think worked in the plot, the storyline? What did you like about it?
I like the fact that there's a mystery involved in it, because they couldn't figure out what it was, and up until the very end they couldn't figure out what it was, and of course it had the added drama of the Enterprise being somewhat an experimental ship at the time, because they were testing new technologies, new advances, and some of them may or may not become Starfleet issue.
Yeah.
So this ship was basically an experiment, and it was just overall mystery about it. And then there's the drama between Decker and Kirk, which you finally got glimpses of within Kirk and superior officers. You know, but this drama between Decker and Kirk was fantastic. The problems with the ship, you know, Kirk's unfamiliarity with the ship, and the drama and the interplay between Spock, McCoy, and Kirk. You know, it was strange. It was actually strange at the end of the movie.
Right.
It's actually strange.
Right. I think what really impressed me, and I never thought of it when I was younger, but in the last few years when I've come to appreciate this movie, I just think the whole story is mind-blowing. Just the thought of an old probe that came from our planet here at NASA, gets sucked all the way across the other side of the galaxy, gets enhanced by these machines, and then gets sent back, and then it becomes to life. I mean, that's just an amazing thought. Like, if you think about it, and for real, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 just left the solar system. You know, they're in interstellar space now. Could you imagine the thought of one of those two coming back as a life form? You know, 300, 400 years later? It just blows my mind, and I think it's a very Star Trek story in that regard, because it really makes you think. It is.
Star Trek has always been a thinking show. You know, Star Trek's always made you think in one form or another. Gene Roddenberry called the original series morality plays, because this was set during the 60s, and the 60s was a time of turmoil, you know, for America. You know, growing, learning, and changing. And this is no different. I mean, this was definitely a Star Trek story. I don't care what anyone says. It was definitely a Star Trek story.
Yes.
You know, it had all the elements in it, just magnified. I wish they had more. I wish this movie had more time to go into more character development with the other characters like Uhura, Scotty, Sulu, you know, Chekhov, you know. But you know, you had to focus on Kirk, Decker, McCoy, Ilea, Spock. You know, that was the focus right there. You know, and only in later movies did you see more character to go.
Exactly. Leonard Nimoy said that numerous times in numerous interviews, that he felt that the cast didn't gel like they did during the original series, and that's true. You can even kind of see it with just in the interaction, like you said, with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. It didn't have that typical banter back and forth. If you notice, McCoy's constantly leaving the bridge.
He's constantly coming on the bridge. He was constantly.
Exactly. So there wasn't a whole lot of that banter. They tried a little bit. If you notice, after Spock comes aboard the ship and they're in the rec room or the observation deck, McCoy says to him, "You know, Spock, you haven't changed a bit. You're just as warm and sociable as ever." And then Spock says something back, but that's really about it.
That's as close to the banter as we get to see.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, like you said, the rest of the characters were just kind of in their spots, you know, kind of doing their thing. You know, so you didn't get to see a lot of growth in them. I mean, of course, they got promoted, and Chekhov was now the chief of security at the weapons station, you know, but it was a shame that they didn't get to all have their moment. You know what I mean? That was kind of a shame.
They all didn't get to have their moments so much later on in the later film.
Right, exactly. Absolutely. So what did you think of Decker and Ilea? Did you like those two characters?
Decker and Ilea's love affair pretty much, you know, overshadowed their responsibilities and pretty much what happened until the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. He was more concerned about losing Ilea after he lost her to the probe than he was than he was before. You know, and he wasn't quite the same after that.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Mm-hmm. He kind of mellowed out toward, well, whatever will be, will be. Mm-hmm. You know, other than that, just protection of the ship, protection of the crew, you know, following Starfleet protocol, rules, regulations, and stipulations, and up until and then we lost Ilea to the probe, that was it.
Right. You know, I always thought it was interesting how quickly Decker decided to merge with V'ger, partly because of her. You know, and partly because he felt Kirk wasn't really respecting him, took his command away from him, you know, but it showed the depth of how much he really loved Ilea. So, I mean, it kind of, at least that part of the characterization flowed through the movie where that was consistent, even after she died. You know, it was even to the point where V'ger's probe was duplicated so well that she basically was Ilea.
She was Ilea. V'ger had the ability to put a living brain inside an android.
Yeah.
Okay, so that actually was Ilea.
Yeah.
If you notice in the scene in Ilea's quarters where Dr. Chapel had put on that beautiful head wreath, and she actually turned into Ilea.
Oh yeah, literally for that moment she was, and then something just clicked, and then she went back to robot. Speaking of Decker and Ilea, what are your thoughts on the ending when they did merge? What did you think about that as a story plot?
I thought that was kind of a letdown in a way, because it wasn't as dramatic as the rest of the movie was. Mm-hmm. You know, of course, there's controversy involving that as well. Mm-hmm. You know, because when Kirk asked McCoy and Spock if we just saw a new life form being born, you know, Spock says, of course. You know, and there's a lot of controversy involving that merger. Mm-hmm. And that controversy is that when Ilea and Decker merged, they gave birth. That was the beginning of the birth of the Borg race.
Okay. Yeah, there were some theories about that out there. Absolutely.
Yes, and those theories are that they gave birth to the Borg race. Actually, that's not true. Because in the 7th season of Voyager, in the episode entitled "Friendship 1," this was before Starfleet, before its predecessor was even developed. The Earth sent out probes, you know, like Friendship 1, you know, telling them how to do this, how to build communications and something. And 7 of 9 in this particular episode says if the Borg had gotten hold of this probe, then, you know, Earth would have already been assimilated. Mm-hmm. Okay? That shows that the Borg was in existence long before Friendship 1. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right about that. And also, if you remember the 6th season episode of Voyager, Dragon's Teeth, where the Vaadwaur had been in suspended animation for 900 years, they knew who the Borg was, too. Yeah, so that does. You're right. That blows that whole theory out of the water.
And yet people still believe this theory because, you know, they can't subscribe it to anything else. Mm-hmm. You know, and, you know, they can't subscribe it to the theory that there's actually a different life form. Mm-hmm. But we don't see what this life form is. Right. Nor do we run into it again later on. It just happened. But for people to believe this particular theory, that Ilea and Decker gave birth to the Borg race, is absolutely impossible.
Yeah, I agree, 100%. Very well, good argument you gave there. Definitely.
Yeah, because it doesn't hold water.
Right.
Because all this happened before the events of Egypt. Before Star Trek: The Motion Picture. All this happened before then.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's no way that it can hold water. It doesn't stand up to criticism like we just did. It doesn't stand up to it. If you look at the facts, it doesn't stand up.
Right. Exactly. Now let's move on to the effects a little bit. Obviously, we talked a little bit in this video already about the amazing special effects they put in. Clearly, they over-special effected the movie, pretty much, because they wanted it to really look like Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So they definitely put absolutely the best effects that they could into this movie. What did the movie end up costing? $40 million to make?
50, actually.
Yeah.
And it was the most expensive movie of its time.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. But it did make its money back.
Right. Right. I would say the only effects that really bother me, I know some people get bored with the travel pod sequence around the Enterprise. I personally love that. I think that was needed to reintroduce the Enterprise to Kirk, to Scotty, to everybody, including the audience. I would say the only time that I think it gets a little overboard is when the Enterprise is flying into V'ger. You see all these weird laser-like special effects.
I agree. That's where it starts to drag.
Absolutely. There goes the figure.
Star Trek: The Motion Picture has been described as Gene Roddenberry's 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
I agree.
Oh, absolutely.
I agree because it has the same sort of sequences in it.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so if you could streamline the sequences of V'ger, to what really mattered instead of stretching out the movie for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
If you streamline the sequences, you would have a better movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I noticed that when I was in the theater recently, that was the only part where my attention kind of drifted.
And that's where everyone's attention drifted.
Yeah, and then it gets worse because then after they fly through all these laser effects, then you finally get, and I didn't know this for years that was the V'ger ship, but they finally get to the outside of the V'ger ship and start flying over it, and I'm like, what am I looking at here? Is this still, what is this? So, I mean, and then they fly over the ship for another 5 minutes.
And you get the crew's reaction to what they're looking at. All that could have been cut out. All that could have been streamlined. All of that could have been cut out. And you would have had a better movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And that actually is a good place for us to transition into the special edition. What did you think of the special edition of the motion picture?
The director's cut?
Yeah.
I was going to ask which version did you see, the theatrical version or the director's cut?
Yeah,
which version?
I like it. It definitely tightens the movie up. And it gives... it gives it a new sound mix. Because if you watch the older version of the motion picture, there's like no sound on the bridge. Nothing. And I think a lot of that had to do with time. They were rushing the movie. They needed to get it out by December 7th or else. So I mean, one of the things I don't like is, I guess they did change a couple things, like the red alert sound. I know that's a little nitpicky, but I always liked that old red alert sound on the ship.
I did too, and I think they returned to that in Wrath of Khan. But they changed some of the special effects around. We did some of the special effects, like the tram entrance.
Yes.
For Admiral Kirk, we came.
Well, we're back. Sorry about that little blip. We ended up, actually, the camera had cut out, so we're just going to continue from this point. Robert is still with me here. Hi, Robert.
Hey, how are you?
Good, good. All right, so where we left off was we were talking about the special edition of the motion picture, and we were talking about some of the changes that had actually started. And you were starting to talk about the tram station a little bit. So what were your thoughts on them changing that scene where they were coming in through Starfleet headquarters?
I liked it better and when they changed it, because on the original they had it like on the wall, with the tram coming in.
Yeah.
But when Foundation Imaging did the special effects this time, they did about half a wall and used the other part of it as a platform, as kind of a launch platform, and that's when you see the original series shuttle taking off.
Yes, that was awesome.
I thought that was a classy touch, as a nod to the original series. And I finally found out with that scene. What they finally did with the Golden Gate Bridge, instead of being used for land traffic, it's as a giant solar panel collector. And that is amazing.
Yeah. You know what I wish they would have done a little bit in the motion picture is I wish they would have shown some in little places maybe some technology from the original series. Because if you think about it, the movie takes place 18 months after the end, or 2.5 years after the end of the 5-year mission of the Enterprise, and the technology just kind of changed radically. And we know for real it was a 10-year gap, so I mean it makes sense. But it would have been cool if they would have incorporated that a little bit somehow.
Well, they actually did, and you didn't recognize it.
Oh, I didn't. What did I see?
Uhura's earpiece.
Oh, okay, good point, good point.
Uhura's earpiece. It's the only thing that hadn't changed. He carried over from the series.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so that was, but I think that they did a really good job with that, especially the shuttle coming. They didn't show the shuttle actually flying over the Golden Gate Bridge per se in the old version. They showed a lot in different version from different angles coming in this time, which was kind of neat. Plus, they put the Stardate in too, which I thought was a neat little touch. Obviously. And then talking about the Vulcan changes, definitely. I mean, the whole thing with the sky, they needed to do that because before they had all these planets and stuff in the sky, and it kind of didn't make sense because in the Man Trap, Uhura had made the comment about Vulcan having no moon. You know, so I'm glad they fixed that sky up.
Whoever did the continuity between the original series and the movie didn't do their job right.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't care how much time has passed. People like you and me will remember stuff like this.
Yep.
And whoever did the continuity was just they needed to be fired, and they wanted to be fired.
Yeah. Especially, if it was, can you imagine if it was nowadays, it'd be all over the internet and everything, you know?
Oh, I know.
So, some of the other changes I really loved. I loved toward the end of the movie when the Enterprise was flying through V'ger, heading toward the actual probe itself. And so we got to see some of the inner workings of the inner of the V'ger ship, but also we got to see there were a whole bunch of different storyboards that were made in the 1970s that they couldn't do because of technology. But in this,
and the money.
Exactly right. So they actually showed these little flickers of light coming down toward the Enterprise that were forming the steps. So that way, when they came up from the saucer section, they were able to walk to the Voyager 6 probe. But they didn't show it that way in the original version. So I thought that was really cool. And one other nice little touch was, did you notice in the original version when the Enterprise was right against those steps that the saucer looked distorted?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad they fixed that.
Yeah, Foundation Imaging, I think, did a wonderful job in doing the special effects.
Absolutely.
I think they did a wonderful job at it. I think they could have gone a little further, though.
What do you think they could have done a little differently?
I think they could have worked on the Enterprise a little more. Because it was all CGI. They had the original model for filming, but which was the A model, of course. But they could have, but they turned it into CGI, and they could have done a little more work with that. I think.
So you don't think the CGI looked as good as it could have?
No. I mean, there's nothing like. I'm like you with your figures. There's nothing like touching the models.
Yes.
And looking at it, looking at the art form of it. That's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when Star Trek stopped using the models, and with Voyager, that really was a sad day. That really was a sad day.
Absolutely.
But this is nothing like the model.
Oh no, I agree with you 100%. I mean, CGI, especially today, looks really, really good, really, really realistic. But I mean, again, if you look at the Enterprise on the screen, I mean, the model is it's stunning.
It is. And the model is considered to be the best filming miniature ever. Ever.
Oh, I believe it. I
mean, it's my favorite incarnation of the Constitution class starship, and my favorite Enterprise of them all. The lines, the look, the angles. It's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, overall, really, just everything about the special effects in the motion picture were just spot on. I mean, even if you look at Star Trek Discovery today, and like I said before, I'm not a big Star Trek Discovery fan, but the show looks very theatrical in its effects. They do a really good job with it.
And they get that from Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Remember, Star Trek: The Motion Picture set the tone for not just the movie,
Exactly.
For Next Generation and DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah, it's been nothing but top notch ever since.
And this is technology from 14 years ago, 1979.
Exactly, right. Yeah.
So Gene Roddenberry's legacy lives.
Oh, absolutely. The only thing I wish that they would do a little more in Discovery is not make it so dark.
Yes,
You
I
see a
agree.
little bit more what's going on in space, you know what I mean? We used to be able to see the ships clearly. Now Discovery's constantly in like shadow and darkness, and it's just hard to maintain and watch.
I've been seeing some film Discovery, for the season. They're 930 years in the future. Where in the 9 worlds of Vulcan did they get that from?
Well, I guess we'll find out in a couple of months when season 3 comes out. We'll see what it looks like. But it'll be interesting, definitely. But
yes,
again,
it will.
But you're right. I mean, we owe everything that we have now with Star Trek to the motion picture. I agree with you 100%.
And Gene Roddenberry was absolutely correct in the rewrites and trying to do what you're trying to do. In fact, you want an idea of how the script should have gone? Get the novelization by Gene Roddenberry. He wrote a novel on Star Trek motion picture, and that was the storyline of the movie. So if you can find it, get it. I think you'll find that it's a little bit different from what you see in the movies.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring that up because we know, fans know, that Star Trek the Motion Picture came from the aborted Star Trek Phase 2 TV series. And that the motion picture is actually In Thy Image, the pilot episode. But
and the Enterprise is a slightly rebuilt version of the Enterprise that was used for Phase 2.
Right, exactly. And have you ever read the script for In Thy Image?
No, I haven't. I know the premise, but I've never read the script.
Okay, it's obviously you can see the motion picture in it, but it's definitely different in its ending and some of the different details. If you get Star Trek Phase 2, The Lost Series, that book by the Reeve Stevenses, either buy it or rent it from your library. They have the full script for In Thy Image in there. I read the whole thing. It's awesome.
I bet it is.
It's not on the same scope as a motion picture because it would have been a TV episode, but I would highly recommend to anybody, if they love the motion picture, they love the history of Star Trek in the 70s, get that book, read In Thy Image. It's an awesome read.
Absolutely. I was in the library to see if I could find it.
Yeah, it's something. All right, so that's pretty much it for the review of Star Trek the Motion Picture. I think we kind of hit on everything. We talked about the effects, the story, the characters, the Borg. We talked a little bit about everything. So, Robert, I wanted to thank you very much for us doing this episode. We've waited a year. We've been talking about doing this.
Oh yes, I've been trying, and I've been keeping on I've been waiting with bated breath to do it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. So we'll be doing some more episodes soon. Well, everybody, that's it for this episode. If you have any, if you want to follow the show, come on to youtube.com. Just type in Pittsburgh's Trek Chat in the search. It'll take you right to my channel. You can also follow on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Pittsburgh's Trek Chat, or you could go on Twitter at PGH Trek Chat. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you again, and until then, may yins live long and prosper.